Hello, we're a week in already. This is Beth. After Glasgow, Sussex and Lancashire, I'm now in London for one morning at least. Ruth, where are you?
I'm at home, but as soon as we finish this, I'm about to jump in a car and drive to Hawick in the Scottish borders to help out John Lamont, one of our long-standing MPs there.
Jess, presumably, one, you haven't left Birmingham, and two, your step count is now at what, 500,000 steps? How are you doing?
Yeah, I don't accumulate the step count, but it is at around 20,000 a day. I am still in Birmingham and I will be out campaigning in my constituency all day, like every other day.
Well, this is another electoral dysfunction. If you follow us, we've appeared in your feed a bit early this week. There's a reason for that, which I'm going to explain to you in a bit. Now, also on this episode, some of the big headline-grabbing policies coming out of the Conservatives, including national service. Jess, we need to talk about how my son and your son Danny felt about this announcement. We'll get onto that. What Keir Starmer's been trying to sell everyone about himself in his early visits and speeches, because it ain't policy, that is for sure. And Diane Abbott, will she stand to be an MP again? That's become a campaign issue as we record it. It's literally unfolding in my WhatsApps as we do this podcast. We're going to do a bit of that. And remember, if anyone has said to you, can you recommend a good podcast for the election, then please share this podcast with them. Ray emailed, is 6 weeks too long for a campaign? How are we feeling a week in? I wake up every morning and I go 36 days, a new dawn, 30 more dawns until polling day. How are we feeling, Jess?
I think 6 weeks is too long at this stage, mainly because if you're not people listening to this and also the three of us, we're into politics. Here we are into politics. I am knocking doors and most people are like, I don't know, I'll decide in about 2 weeks. I want to get to the exciting bit, the sort of 2 weeks out, the sort of frenzied bit where there's loads of people turning up at your office. Yeah, I mean, we've done longer and we've done shorter, I believe. I think 6 weeks is about the average of a sort of short campaign.
For me, it was always like a sine wave. So you started off pretty good at the top because it's exciting because an election's just been called and you've got all these plans about how you're going to make it work, and then you look into the future and 6 weeks seems so far away when every day feels like a month in itself. And then you have a kind of fallow period in weeks 3 and 4 when you just want it to be over and you are done and you are broken and it's like hitting the wall in a marathon.
It's a bit like being pregnant.
Yeah, it's like that. And then the final 2 weeks go so fast and you just wish you had more time and more time and more time. And then you have the count at night. You maybe haven't slept the night before and you don't sleep that night as you're going through. And then suddenly it's over. And whether you're elected or whether you're not elected, there's this amazing absence. So these 6 weeks that you've had the same people, some of them you never met before, some of them are odds and sods and weirdos that turn up to these sort of things. Some of them are absolute salt of the earth loveliness. And you just don't see them again for a while. And then, you write thank you letters and you have like a party and stuff afterwards to say thank you to everybody that helps. But this void, this absence, this like crashing low that you get after the high of a campaign is unbelievable. And anybody that's not been part of it won't ever really understand it, I don't think.
I feel like I am in the election campaign because I've now got a clipboard. Like, it's getting serious, ladies. I love it.
I always have a clipboard.
If you were proper serious, you would have like a film sheet over the top rather than a foldy over, so that in the rain you can still use it and it doesn't destroy. It doesn't destroy the paper when you're putting down people's voting intentions when you're canvassing.
Also, I write notes to myself during the campaign and then I have to follow up those things that I've written on my clipboard. If I don't do it literally the same day that I've been on that door knock, yesterday morning I was like, what does Sally Cat mean? I was like, there's a woman called Sally, she maybe had a cat, I can't remember. I've met so many people, but I remembered that I had to remember Sally Cat.
But look, more of your messages coming up, and keep emailing electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. WhatsApp us on 07934 200 444. Now, let's start with this story this morning because it's really unravelling or unfolding right now. We've had people emailing us asking about Diane Abbott's future. Sarah, who lives in Hackney North, was one of them. And I should say I also live in Sarah's constituency. I live in Stoke Newington, which is part of Diane Abbott's constituency. I should just say that she is my local MP. Now, since Sarah sent that email, this has become a very live issue in the campaign. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, and it really is moving now, and I can fill you in on the latest in a minute. A reminder that in April 2023, Diane Abbott was suspended after saying Jewish, Irish and traveller people do not face racism all their lives. She apologised and withdrew those remarks, but she was suspended as a Labour MP. Now, she's now had the whip restored, which would pave the way for her to run again, but it's not certain that she'll be endorsed by Labour's National Executive Committee. And it's, how could I put it, ladies, this morning? It's fluid, is how I would say it. Diane has said on the record this morning that it is true. There is a story in the Times. I messaged her yesterday and she said to me the Times story is true. Now, the Times story says that she is being barred from standing as the Labour candidate in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. So I've had this from some Labour sources about whether or not she has been barred from standing as an MP, that they are telling me that no decision has been taken. And just to unpack this a bit, you've got Diane on record telling me that the Times story is true, that she's going to be barred from standing as an MP. And then on the Labour side, you've got sources telling me they're saying that that isn't correct because the NEC hasn't taken the decision. I think it might be useful to bring Jess in now, because you can explain to us, Jess, what's going on in terms of the process here. What's the NEC and what does it do?
So the NEC is the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, and just to give an idea, they are the most powerful body within the Labour Party. It's a massive group of people, and if I was honest, I was on the NEC for a spell, and that is a lot of hours of my life I'm never getting back. It's a lot of talking about minutes, and the first agenda item takes about 4 hours. It's not something I'd volunteer for again. It's made up of lay members who are elected by people in the Labour Party, members of the Labour Party. It's made up of the Parliamentary Labour Party has 2 representatives on the, or 3 even, representatives on the NEC. The unions have representatives. So it's a big body of people. So even if your constituency Labour Party has said that they want you to be the candidate, the NEC has the power to say yay or nay. And at the moment, because there's lots of retirements happening all of a sudden, and like actually it will be up to the NEC to do much of that decision making about who gets to stand.
Diane has also said this morning that she actually hasn't heard from the party. So I am a little bit confused.
What it sounds to me like is that the NEC haven't made that decision yet. I imagine they're having to meet at the moment literally every single day. So all of our nomination papers have to be in by the 7th. And after that, all bets are off. Like a little bit like what happened in Rochdale. It was too late for the NEC to act after that situation. I imagine, and I don't know, that this has got a bit confused and maybe the NEC just hasn't made the decision yet.
So a party source said to me that they think that they are going to do this, that they're really going to do this, bar her from standing. I mean, she's been the MP there. I had a look this morning. I think it's 37 years. And they said at this stage in the general election cycle, they can just parachute a candidate in and there's nothing the local party can do about it.
I mean, personally and politically, I think that that they should probably just let Diane run in Hackney, like you say, unless she, it should be for her to decide.
Just to be clear, because this is moving, from your perspective, Jess, if Diane still wants to stand and she's had the whip restored and they basically block her from standing, that is a bad look for that. You don't think that should happen?
I just think it's a fight not worth having at this stage, and not ever even anything to do with the merits of the particular case. Is that all the things remain true, that Diane Abbott was the first black woman ever elected. She has served that constituency.
For what it's worth, I was speaking to a very, very senior Labour source last week, and I asked them about Diane. I put it to them, it will look really bad if you force her to stand down if she doesn't want to. And they said to me, it's a decision for the NEC, but their view, like yours, Jess, was that she probably would be able to stand. So I don't know what's going on. Ruth, what do you think?
first of all, it sounds like there's terrible communication. Second of all, we talked about this before, and we said, like, our inkling was that the reason that writing a newspaper article, which she then apologised for and said she'd put in the wrong draft, the idea that it had taken over a year to investigate was that the Labour Party was looking for an elegant solution where she was still suspended, so that she was therefore stopped from running it again. Now, it didn't work out that way, and we also had a leak to, I think it was Newsnight, showing that her investigation was actually up 5 months ago and she hadn't had the whip restored. So it does look as if there's somebody in Labour that doesn't want her to stand. To be honest, where the polls are, given how successful the launch of the Labour Party and how tight the campaign has been so far, they probably don't need this distraction in terms of having to go in there and have the news cycle about this rather than about attacking the Tories or talking about, giving a bit of background on Starmer or whatever it is.
I'm split about what they're going to do. It seems to me that Diane is putting it out there that as far as she's concerned, they're going to bar her for standing, but also perhaps to put pressure on the NEC to not take that decision, right? As the Labour leadership are making it clear that it's an NEC decision, the decision's not taken. But look, there is another part of me, and I've got this memory of Starmer standing in front of me going, I am ruthless, and it would be ruthless to kick her out. And it might be that they take the calculation, well, it will be a bad news cycle for 24 hours and then the whole big circus moves on. Perhaps what they do is the elegant solution is that they give her a peerage and as the first black woman MP, she goes and sits in the House of Lords, right? So
that should happen. I mean, of all the peerages that get given out, that is one that I would say, I find some of them a bit indefensible, but, people like Harriet Harman, Diane Abbott, like these are women who've been there so long.
I just think with Corbyn it was really clear they chucked him out of the party, right? And it was almost like a fight Starmer wanted to have. But with Diane, it's like you've restored the whip. She's the first black female MP. Jess thinks she stays. Ruth thinks, and Ruth, you think that they might run down the clock and try and get rid of her, and I think she could turn up in the House of Lords, but I literally don't have a Scoobies at the moment. I mean, I've got a cat called Scooby, but I don't have a Scoobies on what's going to happen in this story because I think it's unfolding. So if my little WhatsApps ping again and I get an update, I'll let you know. Right, shall we move on?
Why have you got a cat called Scooby? Does it identify as a dog?
I don't know, because my children... I don't know why because my children pick the names.
We've got, my mate Amy's got a dog that we think identifies as a cat.
I've got a dog called Wilson, and everybody thinks that it's after Harold Wilson, and they think they're hilarious. They're like, "Oh, what's your dog called?" It's called Wilson. "Oh, is that after Harold Wilson?" Ha ha. It's like, no.
Oh no.
I met a dog called Ted yesterday, and the man said it was named after Ted Heath.
So he's not quite a rescue, but we were his third family by 11 months, and he was already called Will. Aww. But I always think dogs need like 2 syllables to call. So we tried lots of different things like Wilbur or all the rest of it, and he answered to Wilson when we went through all these different names. So we called him Wilson.
Nice. Well, you know what? We should get the dysfunctioners out there. If anyone has named their pet, let's do it. If anyone out there has named their pet after a politician, can you email them in and send us a picture and explain who the pet is and why they are named after that particular person? I think there's a whole genre out there. Let's move on to the most talked about election pledge so far, it seems. It came from Rishi Sunak, the idea of mandatory national service. So basically, when you turn 18, you'd be expected to do weekend community work for a year or sign up for a 12-month military training scheme, although I was told that that's only 30,000 places and that's really competitive, although how they find those places within, whether they have capacity is a different conversation. But anyway, here we go, mandatory national service. Ruth, how do you think that went down?
I think that it came out of nowhere and it landed like a rock in a pool, and there's been plenty of ripples out of it. I mean, I think something as big as that you have to roll the pitch for, especially when it has so many caveats as it wouldn't be for combat arms, it wouldn't be this, it wouldn't be that or the other. You know, as much as they say that it's been worked on for weeks and months, it does have a fag packet feel to it. I mean, I am entirely the wrong person to ask about sort of national military service on the grounds that I volunteered to join the Territorial Army and I loved the army, and if they hadn't broken my back in 3 places when I jumped through a window frame on command and ended up in Salisbury General Hospital for a week and a half, I would still be in the Territorial Army. Like, I really quite like the army. I'm quite military. I like all of that sort of stuff. But I've never really believed in a kind of conscription. I've never believed in dragooning people in because they don't make good soldiers. It seems to be very obvious what the point of it is, because if you look at the polls, the Tories are in the low 20s. They need to get up to at least 30% of the vote to provide, a platform for opposition that will keep Keir Starmer honest. You've got Reform running at 12 to 14% in the polls. The decision, I think, has clearly been made by Central Office that the softer vote to get back are people that have left the Tories to go for Reform than the people that have left the Tories to go Labour or Lib Dem, particularly in seats where there's going to be tactical voting. So what you need to do is squeeze Reform down to about 5 or 6%, and then suddenly the Tory party's back in the races again. And that's why you've seen the Prime Minister playing Crown Green bowls. That's why, you have this. That's why we're talking about a quadruple lock on pensions and a tax relief. So it's about how do you narrow the polls and then start to exert pressure on Labour.
I was thinking quite hard as this policy came out, and then the pensions, which we'll come on to. This is fascinating me. And then I went back to our conversation a week ago about why call the election now. And I messaged a very senior Conservative about this, because I was like, it seemed to me there's a couple of things going on. We already talked last week about the economy and the way in which the idea that turning the corner and you're going to feel better off in 3 months' time, it's not going to happen for people. So actually the risk is downside for Sunak. If he rhetorically tells people, don't risk it on that guy because you're feeling better under me when people are not, that just gives more momentum to the idea of change. But what's become really clear in the past week in the way that they're running the early stages of this campaign is exactly that they've surprised the enemy, if you like. They have gone early. Reform aren't quite ready. Can they stand in all the seats that they intended to? Because they were warning that they were going to stand in all the seats against the Conservatives, and then they're putting out all like this sort of like machine gun of policies that they hope will pull Reform voters back to the Conservatives. So when we talk about a Conservative Labour battleground, these early stages of the campaign, it's about shoring up the right. Anyway, I messaged this senior Conservative about it because it reminded me, Ruth, you'll get this, and Jess, about Dominic Cummings' obsession with that military Chinese strategist.
I think also part of this is the way this campaign is going to go, which is big eye-catching stuff from the Tories, who need to do more of the running. Labour reacting to that because, the best manifesto has nothing in it if you're going to become a government, because you want complete freedom of movement. So actually we've not seen big policy offerings from Labour because they've not had to, because they can get through a day by reacting to a Tory big one. But if the polls suddenly close, if in a week or 2 weeks you start to see, a contraction of maybe 6 points or 7 points, suddenly you start putting pressure on Labour. What are Labour going to do? Is this slipping away from them? Are they beginning to flunk the test? Blah, blah, blah. And I have to say, up until now, I've been surprised at how little scrutiny and how little pressure has been applied to a Labour Party that's so far ahead. They look duty-bound to be the next sort of government. But it's like nailing jelly to a wall because there's no policy to aim at. So there's a lot going on here.
I have interviewed Keir Starmer 6 times now in 3 weeks, and the final one, it was...
Oh, God.
I'm just going to let that breathe. I'm just going to let that breathe.
Did you know that his father's a tool maker?
Yes, I did, but... No,
Has
Ruth,
he told you 6 times in 3 weeks?
He's told me a number of times, but this is important. Apparently, the Labour Party told me that when you ask the public, only 11% of voters actually know that. So
nobody knows what a fucking toolmaker is. When was he born? 1872.
No, the point. Well, I mean, the Tories are saying he's too old to be PM, aren't they? Sort of. But the reason I'm saying that is that from their point of view, right, so 2 points. Ruth, you're absolutely right. There has been no policy announcements from the Labour Party. And actually, he did a speech about values and who he was on Monday. So I ended up doing this sort of, I kind of walked around the press conference before the thing going, feelings. You know, like I had to sort of talk to him about his I don't know. And I'm with you a bit, actually. I'm like, I've done the feelings interview now. Now we have to get back to policy and how you're going to run the country. But they're not announced.
He doesn't have to.
They're not.
He doesn't have to, because the Tories are doing enough big policy stuff that there's something to aim for, and they don't have to right now.
Yes, so they don't have to announce anything, and then when you try to pin them on spending cuts or tax prices, they've got their kind of raft of a very tiny suite of policies that they keep rolling out. But
you'll see one now to get Diane Abbott off the front pages. So tomorrow or the next day, if this rumbles on, they'll do a big policy thing to get people onto that, to get them off of her.
The point of the Labour campaign so far is safety first, don't say anything that's going to rock the boat. The Conservatives are having to come up with all the policies, and really it seems like with the enthusiasm gap between the polls and what do the public think of Starmer, they're having to do quite a presidential campaign in which it's trying to get Starmer across. But Jess, let's go back to national service. So it's Bank Holiday Monday, we go down to Sussex. Starmer is doing a speech in a village hall. I mean, it was like bucolic England, yeah. And it actually reminded me of my childhood, because I grew up, you know, in a small town outside of London in the southeast, and we also had a parish hall, and, you know, there was bunting and there were formica tables, and it was this kind of, this is my backstory, this is who I am the quintessential English guy. Like, I am not an elite from London. I understand sort of small England or little England, and celebrated that. It was actually very familiar to me, because it was kind of where I came from, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting, the way he is trying to frame who he is, and they're using the optics of a village hall with bunting and endless cups of tea and sort of slightly peeling paint on the walls. But when I asked him about the national service, I did it in the point of saying, look, he said it's like a teenage dad's army. That's what he said in the speech, and everyone laughed at it, right? I said to him afterwards, actually, in the question, you know, if you actually poll this with the public, they quite like some form of national service. It's not an unpopular idea. It's actually maybe quite an interesting idea. He said it was desperate, but he also said, Jess, that he didn't necessarily disagree on the principle. He just didn't think that this policy had been well thought out, and it did begin to fall apart. It's like, are you going to arrest people? No. Are you going to fine people? How are you going to make, well, my main thing was, how on earth would I make my teenage son do it? That was my main, like, how am I going to make him do this? He was not keen.
But my son Danny, who the previous week had gone to work at a vintage fair with his auntie Kerry, who's not really his auntie, she's an elderly woman who was friends with his nan, gone to help her out. So, you know, the idea that young people aren't doing this stuff anyway. But he had got a sort of Russian style fur hat, and his response to it was to come out door knocking with me wearing a Russian style hat as if he was ready for military service at any moment, because my son Danny is a piss taker. I mean, the idea that it's popular that young people should do something is not a surprise to me. The idea that the military bit of this doesn't already exist, it's basically volunteer to be in the army. That already exists. That can happen now. So that bit of it was just completely and utterly just for show and for a demographic, pulling back reform voters. And also, this isn't new. David Cameron did it. It was called the National Citizenship Service, and it sank without a trace. So it's about choices. And if you have to, where they found, and they keep saying for every policy that they come out with, they keep saying, we're going to get the money from stopping tax dodging and tax evasion. I'm like, you've been in for 14 years. Have you just been allowing tax evasion for that entire time? Are you joking me?
I mean, apart from the sort of principle of the idea of, Jess has a point there, doesn't she, that £2.5 billion, they are taking it from two pots, they say. One is the Prosperity Fund, which was actually the levelling up money, so they're re-diverting some of that. And the second thing, so they're going to clamp down on tax avoidance of non-doms to raise more money. Ruth, going back to what Jess said, I mean, there has been cuts to funding for youth services. What do you think about the idea of, if you've got £2.5 billion, is this the policy for young people that you would choose the money to spend on? What do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that it allows candidates to say if they're questioned about this, because it is an eye-catching policy, and they will be, you also get to say that the money used to support this also helps give people skills and get them into jobs and get them in the workplaces and all the rest of it. So you've got that kind of defence. But I think talking about this as if it is going to happen is in some ways, this is almost a little bit, and this is going to make a headline, and I don't mean it to, but this is the best example I can find. It's like when Trump was like, drain the swamp, build a wall, lock her up. These are statements which people are supposed to take seriously, but not literally. They didn't think that if Trump won, he was going to put Hillary Clinton in jail, particularly, or that he was going to manifestly change the way that Washington worked and how many people were congressmen and senators and drain the swamp that way, or necessarily that he was going to finish the border wall to the south. But it was about sending signals. I mean, one, if you think that the Conservative Party after this election is going to be the government and it's going to be in a strong enough position to be able to create the infrastructure to create a policy like this for every child of a certain age, that I think there's a lot of heavy lifting of if in there. So in a sense, it kind of doesn't matter where they say they're going to allocate the funds from. This is about a sense of what do we want to do? How do you claw these people back? I mean, personally, I quite liked the idea of the National Citizen Service that Cameron brought in, because it was voluntary and it allowed kids from communities that might not get chances to serve abroad or serve in other communities and to meet different people. We didn't do it in Scotland. The SNP didn't want it. So we didn't have the opportunity, so I never saw it up close. But it failed to launch, I would say. It never really worked. I thought the idea was sound-ish, but it just didn't work.
The idea was sound, but I did see it up front in my community, and it was posh kids on it.
Anyway, the point was that, yeah, it was an eye-catching policy, but if it was ever to be implemented, it would be like a Swiss cheese, wouldn't it? There'd be so many holes in it.
Yeah.
Although Switzerland is one of the countries that has national service, along with Sweden and Norway and France.
Let's pause for a minute, and then we're going to talk some more about the early days of the campaign for Rishi Sunak. Right, if we go back from last Wednesday onwards, it didn't get much better for Rishi Sunak after the election announcement. So parts of the internet enjoyed the irony of his visit to the Titanic quarter in Belfast. Shout out to the local reporter there who asked him whether he came here because he was the captain of a sinking ship. I mean, you can't not ask that question. And then Andrea Leadsom and Michael Gove said they're not standing again. And then there was another Reform defection on Monday. Lucy Allen, the outgoing Conservative MP in Telford. And I know Telford well because that is where Boris Johnson launched the 2019 Conservative manifesto. She defected to Reform in deciding to support the Reform candidate there, not the Tory one that might succeed her or not. So she had the whip withdrawn and was suspended. Sorry, she was suspended from the party. And then the Prime Minister also asked Welsh voters if they were looking forward to the Euros when Wales didn't qualify for the Euros. I've actually got a bit from the campaign about how they think it's going, so I will come on to that because I did do my work and I do try and message some of my sources to update you all about how they think it's going. But Ruth, before I kind of put that into this chat, explain how you go about a campaign to avoid these sorts of gaffes.
So usually you have a kind of list of where are the hotspots that you want to hit, which areas do you want to go to, and then you look at the individual constituencies in there. Then you have people that are on the ground that sort of tell you where's good to go, or do we know any kind of friendly businesses, or I don't know, nurseries or sports centres or whatever it is that you want to do, and then you kind of cross-reference that with whatever your policy of the day is. So if it's an agriculture one, you go to a farm, blah blah blah. You then send people out in advance. You have an advance team that go and check, is there I don't know, a massive incinerator there? Do you have to pass a car crash that's not been moved from the motorway in order to get there? Like all of these visual cues that are hilarious for headline writers and newspapers. And then also you kind of make sure that your candidate or your leader has that sort of touch and feel that they're aware, they know to stay away from an exit sign if you can't cover the exit signs up and stuff like that. So one of the weirdest ones I had to do to save a photo shoot was get on the back of a 3.5-ton buffalo, which had gored its own farmer to the point where he had been in hospital for 5 months with a damaged kidney and had to be sort of sewn up. And the reason we had was because we went out, we'd go into this buffalo farm in Fife to launch our rural manifesto. Great. But it was we went there the day after they'd all been let out of their sheds. It was a Friday, so we thought it'd be a laugh. We'll take all the hack pack. We'll have a barbecue beforehand, like at there, and we'll have a chat through about stuff. We'll do all the off-the-record stuff. Put people in a trailer. We'll go down and we'll have like this lovely bucolic.
I hope there was not beef burgers on that barbecue.
Oh, no, it was buffalo burgers. They were great. From the well-hung buffalo burger place. It was great. It was really good fun. But when we got out there, we got everybody out there. They'd only been let out of their sheds for the winter, like the day before. So they were really skittish. And they just kept running away. And every time people tried to do a piece to camera, like all you saw was a herd of buffalo's arses, like running away over the hill in the background and poo and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And we're getting to the point where we'd had people out there now on site for over an hour and they needed to get back. And because I'm an ex-hack myself, like I know like they've got to file, they've got to be able to, make the lunchtime news. So I was like, right, let's go. Like I was speaking to the farmers, like, what else can we do? So like we got them up to the pen where so it was all the girls that were out on the hill. I got back to the kind of champion bull that they had, and I had to like get them to give me a leggy up, and then he smacked it on the arse on the way round. And there's pictures of me on this thing, and I've horse ridden before. Like I'm pretty, like I like animals. I'm quite good around them. I was fucking terrified. I was honestly I cannot explain to you, and you can't see in the pictures how huge this thing is, and like. My legs aren't very long, but it's like sitting on a sofa, straddling it widthwise, like, and it's moving around, and there's no saddle or anything like that, and there's nothing to hold on to. There's no reins, there's no nothing, and I'm going like, I have to keep smiling, and it was fine because we got the shots, and that made the front. I'd rather
lose an election.
Yeah, no, we got this. Well, the problem was I can't remember which election that was, but for the first general that I fought, we were coming from fourth. We were in fourth position in Scotland, and you're not in the top two, so you don't get your quotes at the top of the paper, and this was when papers still mattered. Like, that's the reason the Lib Dems all do these crap things, like Ed Davies flying off a paddleboard 6 times for fun.
I have to say, though, this is from my colleague Rob Powell, who's on the campaign bus with the PM, talking about how to avoid the gaffes. This is what he wrote. He said, it was a bumpy start to the Tory election campaign. Day 6, somewhat smoother for Sunak. And he says, he says, during a TV interview in the changing room of the Bowls Club in Leicestershire, a hat was strategically placed to cover a name tag adorned with the blush-worthy name Glasscock.
Brilliant.
But this is the other one they did on this tour, because so they obviously realise. So then he goes to a homeware factory in Staffordshire, and a Tory aide apparently spotted a can of Monster energy drink from a worktop and disappeared it, before he came into shot, right?
And that's what they should do. They have to do that. And that's why you have good advancement. And that's why when they had that reset meeting on Saturday, if I'd been part of it, or if some of the really experienced people in the party, far more experienced than me, like Liz Sugg, who was Cameron's kind of advanced person, an ops chief, who should have been there. I don't know if she was, but like I would, if I was in Tory HQ, I would beg her to come on board because she's so good at what she does. That's what they needed to do, is like strip it out, make it simple, make it much more simple. Do one thing a day.
Why did they have to get rid of a can of Monster?
Because if you've done a weekend going, it's Sleepy Keir. Do you remember all of that? The tat lines over the weekend, because you're too busy actually campaigning, whereas we're just sitting around.
Yeah, I'd missed that.
There was a whole thing over the weekend about Sunak's not out today, so he's having a duvet day. So to be fair, the Labour lot started it. And I was like, for God's sake, they're all working their socks off, please. And then it turned into, Starmer's not doing something, it's Sleepy Starmer. I mean, adage to Sleepy Joe. But if you're going along that, then having the Prime Minister next to a massive monster energy drink, right, you're then going to have the whole, like, who's tired now? But look, from a Conservative point of view, let me give you a bit of a taster of how they feel it's going inside the bunker. This is what I got this morning because I was messaging them about it. Their view is they're pleased with how the first week has gone. They think they are showing a clear difference between the Conservatives and Labour. They make the point that Starmer and Rees have both done speeches where they've said nothing about new policies. They say they've already announced 3 substantive policies that they describe as bold and have cut through. And they have a little go about Labour not backing their decision to lift the bans for the point at which pensioners pay income tax, and the reason that they do that is we've talked about this thing called fiscal drag. Basically, you freeze the tax bands, and as everyone's wages go up, they get dragged into higher tax bands, and it's a way of the government taking more tax of you, and you barely even notice it. What they're doing for pensioners is they've pledged to lift the band for pensioners so that pensioners on the basic state pension don't end up paying tax on it in the next parliament as they would have done because of this fiscal drag, right? And they said that will save 8 million pensioners up to 300 quid.
Both parties seem to think that pensioners' votes relies on things that you give to pensioners, like what is it that they are in receipt of. And actually, almost every person I know that's above pensionable age cares more about their children and their children's children than they care 100%. About themselves. 100%. Whether, irrespective of whether, you know, they have a workplace pension as well as their state pension, irrespective of whether they've actually struggled since they've retired or not. Almost every single person I know that's above pensionable age cares far more about the next generation, and more importantly, the one after that, than they care about their own generation.
I think I did see early polling suggesting that pensioners are beginning to switch back to the Conservatives as they announce these policies.
We've had a couple in the last 2 days that show a slight tightening, but within the margin of error. You will start to see, I reckon, in about a week's time, whether this Tory squeeze on reform is beginning to work or not. And if it does, actually I think the dynamic of the race will change a little bit, because there will suddenly become a bit more pressure on Labour.
Keep emailing electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. WhatsApp us on 07934 200 444. And I've actually got to tell you something. What I didn't say when we were doing this podcast, when it goes, as we've been talking, Anas Sarwar has sent me a voice note. So when I was in Glasgow on Friday, Anas was there with Starmer for the launch, right? And he said, I love your podcast. And I said, send me a voice note. I haven't even listened to it because we've been talking.
Listen, get it on.
Should we play it? Okay, hang on.
Hi Beth, I just wanted to send a quick message to say what a fantastic job you're all doing on the podcast, and you're definitely showing the boys how to do it. You've got a fantastic lineup. Jess Phillips, who I love to bits, and we have a great laugh all the time. Please give her a chance to get on the doorstep though and persuade people to vote Labour in this election. Ruth Davison, Scotland's own. Ruth, you sent me a really lovely box of roses after we won the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election. The question is, if we beat the SNP this year, what are you going to send me? And to you, Beth, the ultimate boss lady of the podcast, of Sky News and journalism in particular, I was saying this to you when you were up, you need to check out The Gentleman on Netflix. Susie Glass, the boss lady. It's Beth Rigby all over. Enjoy the podcast, guys. I hope you enjoy the election campaign, and why not come up and do a special in Scotland? Take care.
I mean, he's the new Michael Gove, isn't he, with that flattery?
Yes.
I love
he's such
Anas.
a smoothie chops. He always has been. Can I explain the boxes of roses?
Yes, explain the boxes of roses.
Because that has context in Scotland. So he was on a radio show that I was doing after the Rutherglen by-election, and I had said that he deserves his flowers because they fought a good campaign. And he said, well, if I deserve my flowers, are you going to send me some flowers then? So I sent him 4 tubs of Cadbury's roses to his office because he used to be a dentist, and I thought I would sabotage him with chocolate.
You quite like him, do you, Ruth? Do you quite like him?
Like, he's one of, like I said, like everybody in politics has people that they get on with from other parties and that you're able to have a chat with. And Anas and I have always gotten on from when he was an MP before he lost his seat, and then he came a couple of years later into the Scottish Parliament. And we had this lovely exchange in the basement car park of Holyrood when I was leaving, and he's, like I say, he's a ridiculous flatterer, like Michael Gove. It was like, oh, Ruth, why are you going? Like, you could have been the next First Minister. I was like, yeah, well, no. But also I was like, but Anas, I get something that is even better than that. And he's like, oh, what's that? I was like, I get to be happy. Enjoy the rest of your time in Parliament.
So Anas Sarwar, he's the new-ish leader of Scottish Labour, and it's fair to say Labour's fortunes are doing better in Scotland, but also clearly Labour in Scotland benefiting from the difficulties that the SNP are having too. I have to say, the both of them look cock-a-hoot when I saw them in Glasgow on Friday with their stump speeches. Anas also did this like blue steel thing, like he just looked straight down the lens, no script, totally flawless. And I said to him afterwards, I was like, did you actually memorise that? And he did.
We do a lot of media in Scotland. That's one thing that you get about like kind of Scottish politicians generally, like Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond and Anas Sarwar and others, is that they're usually pretty good in the media because we do so much of it, because we've got separate Scottish TV channels and radio channels, and like you get it kicked into you pretty early on. But Anas also comes from a scion of Labour families. So his dad, Mohammed Sarwar, was the first ever Muslim MP in the UK, and he was elected in Glasgow, and he then went on, once he left the House of Commons, he then went back to Pakistan and became governor of the Punjab. He's absolutely steeped in politics, Anas. So yeah, he's got a touch and feel for it.
And let's answer Anas's question too about you, Jess, because we are going to let you have a bit of time to campaign, because who are we to stand in the way of democracy? And Jess, you've got a lot of doors to knock in Birmingham Yardley. So you're not going to be with us full time over the next few weeks. But exciting news as we take that in. I'm sad about that, but it is what it is, right?
I'm sad, but it is what it is. And I have a job and it is very, very full on and it needs me.
And also Sky has to keep themselves honest. To have a candidate in a seat when there's not other candidates, it's very difficult because of just being fair and living by election rules and going above and beyond. But I am devastated, Jess, and I know that the middle of last century in Ireland, they outlawed keening at funerals. When you would have people like just prostrating themselves over the coffin and doing all of the yelping, and that is how I'm going to feel for the next 4 weeks.
But it's like barely any time, and the exciting news is Jess is going to be running her very own electoral dysfunction subs bench. So she's going to open up her very full and rich and tantalising black book. She's going to pick her subs, aren't you, Jess? People you know.
Am I going to get one of those things like a football manager where I get to hold up the number?
Yeah, you can do what the hell you want.
Come off.
So you're going to, it's going to be people
those.
you know, people you trust to look after your electoral dysfunction seat whilst you're notching up the steps on the campaign trail.
I hope they're all going to come and sit here in my bedroom. I'm going to select some people who I think will, represent all the facets of my personal and political life.
So basically, your emissaries are going to come on this podcast to channel Jess. So that is the silver lining to our Jess Phillips too busy because she's got to campaign, and also she is a candidate.
Yes. I've forgotten her already.
She doesn't mean that. She's heartbroken.
Is it going to be like when Angus Dayton left Have I Got News For You, and then actually having a rotating chair is better? I mean, this might improve us.
Funny enough, when I suggested to Tom that I was going to do this, I was going to have a suspense. His first response was, "What you should do is get people who've been kicked off being presenters for being shamed." And he was like, like Dayton, Angus Dayton, Richard Bacon. These were my husband's suggestions: is to go out and find anybody who has been terribly shamed and allow them to be my sub. So I don't know whether that's saying much about what he thinks about me.
Has he not noticed that there's an election on? What does he think's happened here?
You're going to lose so much weight, and also you won't have time to have a haircut. So by the time you come back in a few weeks, we might not recognise you. We'd be like, who's this person?
I'll look completely
You'll be like,
different.
It's just me, post-campaign.
I might not get elected. You never know.
To be fair, it's healthy for every person to remember that.
You said that last week. You said as soon as you become a candidate, you've got to fight, and that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's life. And you're
That's what we
gonna.
sign up
How
to.
many doors do you think you will knock in the next 36 days?
I mean, me personally, it will be probably a couple of thousand, but my team will knock easily 30,000 doors, 25,000 doors. Between us, we will do that. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, we knocked all the doors on one street last night, and that each time you go out and knock, it's like 300 doors. So if you're doing that, you're doing 1,000 a day, aren't you? So
Amazing. But look, you also, let's just be clear as well, like, to quote Theresa May, nothing has changed. You're
changed, yeah. I'll be back, don't worry.
You're still going to hear.
Win, lose or draw, I'll be back.
Look, we're still going to hear from you, Jess, each week, because you're going to be using our burner phone to call in to explain who your super subs are. We're going to look forward to welcoming you back so much in our bumper morning after episode on July the 5th, if I'm still standing. Enjoy the campaign.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see who's the first person on your subs bench. It's going to be wild.
I'll see you on the
We'll
flip
see
side,
you on the other
guys.
side. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Bye.